Welcome to the Grand Rounds for the Underground podcast. The views and opinions of the speakers are their own and do not represent anyone else's. Let's get to the podcast. When we talk about an NPI number,
What is an NPI number, Rick? Let's go there. Let's go basics.
Yeah, I was to say,
or Rick or John. Whoever.
Yeah,
it's a National Provider Identification Number.
I agree.
So what is that used for?
It's used to write for non-opiate type drugs. It's, you're basically writing for your antibiotics, your antiparasitics.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just general purpose, sick call type things.
So you can limit that according to position, scope of practice. So by title, you could inject a NPI that is specific for medics, for different types of medics, potentially. Is that correct?
And
that
as
is correct.
John brought up off-cam, whatever. He brought up that the Air Force independent duty medical technicians and the Navy independent duty corpsmen do have NPI numbers and can do these things. Yes, sir.
And so what I'm getting at is that NPI number, by having that, is something that's recognized by hospitals, military hospitals and civilian. It makes it's something that they're comfortable and familiar with. So it makes that cross organization, that cross talk a little bit easier when you send a medic, a line medic, a soft medic to an MTF to do a rotation to get exposure to actual patients under supervision with an NPI number. They understand that. When you talk about Civ-Mil partnership, when you send them to an MPT rotation off base, that's another thing that they're familiar with. So these are things that,
absolutely, which is
they'd
big.
Be more comfortable.
Yes, sir.
Allowing them to do things.
Yes, sir.
Because that's defined in the NPI category that they're listed under. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, you are. And here's the thing. Let's talk about, we're talking the medicine piece. Let's talk about the business aspect of a hospital. You've got to create RVUs. You've got to be able to generate billing. This is where in the Army, we've never addressed this. And this is one of the key points is that in the civilian sector with those partnerships, you have to be able to bill. So the partnerships that we have for the medics, a paramedic in pre-hospital insurance doesn't cover. It is one of those things that, well, I shouldn't say it doesn't cover. They cover it to a certain extent, but in the hospital, when you're actually generating, your ICD-10 codes, that's what's going to make things billable. So when you look at this from a point of view, we teach medics to do procedures like, finger thoracostomies. We do, crikes, blah, blah. These are all chargeable.
Saving interventions, regardless of how much it costs, because it's military to military. Sorry, John.
Exactly. So in order to, and we do, these are same procedures that are utilized in hospitals, but they get charged. When a medic does this, the billing, and you've got to follow the money, how is it able to be billed? Because are they, when you have a national provider index number, then you are considered someone who can do a procedure, and therefore it can be billed against, where if you don't, it's not. So this is why some of the limitations are there, because you need to have that, you need to be authorized to do it in order to generate the billing. And so I hate to say that it goes hand in hand, but it does. And so those are the kinds of things that when people will, talk about, why can't we do this? We can do this here. Well, there's not a civilian application for it. Is paramedic the right answer? No, it doesn't cover the full scope of what you're trained to do, but is the only civilian certification that encompasses it. And there have been debates about creating a type of paramedic, and we've seen the tactical paramedic, we've seen the community, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day,
National Registry has talked about a military paramedic for 20 years and never came up with something. I agree.
Well, one reason they haven't come up with it, and I've seen it over the years, is because the military cannot agree between all the services as to what that needs to be.
Agreed.
That being said, it's kind of funny to me, right? Because everyone goes, people go through med school. They go through med school and then they specialize. They get their residencies, blah, blah.
4 semesters and 3, 4, 5, 10, 8, whatever residency. Agreed. That's a standard. Yes, sir.
So now, in the paramedic world, if we look at this, you've got your tactical paramedic, your flight paramedic, local transport, community, blah, blah, blah. But the question that I have, though, is the Department of Transportation the right agency to manage the type of medic that the military is.
Well,
Agreed.
yeah, but at the end of the day, I don't think they're the right organization to manage the type of military medic, but I think that's echelons above what we actually have access and influence to.
Right. Agreed.
So for
So
EMS, they are in charge of EMS. And when you look at the whole EMS system for good or bad, that's just the way it's structured in on the American side anyway. But I wouldn't put the military medics under that. But if you can have some sort of correlation, some sort of there has to be some sort of equivalency, and we don't have that yet.
So here's a funny thing. I think that, military medics, some of them want to go ahead and go under that route. I think that's a viable path. But, in the United States, we have an access to care issue. And so therefore
Yes,
we've
sir.
got, just when you think about how many corpsmen and IDMTs are out or, are retired, they don't practice medicine, or they go to another school to practice medicine. However, these are people that could very competently, because they already have their NPI, look at a position going into an urgent care or going into an ED to do fast track work and subsidize that. Now, the VA has started a program, excuse me, to be able to try to facilitate that type of thing. But there again, in the Army, we are so far behind because we have no
Yeah.
pathway to
Yes,
that.
sir.
Yeah.
But, that being said in itself, and think about the procedures also that, we get trained in that could be useful in those realms.
Absolutely.
And so there's a lot of things that that can come out of this. However, let's look at something else for a second. And this is another thing that's going to be up at a higher level. You look at the joint trauma, the joint trauma system, and it falls underneath DHA. Is DHA the right place? Because here you have the DHA that reports to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs. And when they make changes to tactical combat casualty care and want to implement them into the, Army, into the FORSCOM world, well, that falls underneath a different Assistant Secretary of Defense.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. We'll see you next time.